I'd landed earlier than expected. Client in Minneapolis had an emergency and canceled last minute. So, for once, I wasn't dragging my suitcase into a hotel lobby at 11 p.m. or nursing lukewarm coffee on a red-eye flight. I was driving home on a warm Friday afternoon, the kind where the sun streaked across the windshield and made even a tired man like me feel something close to hope. I pulled into our cul-de-sac, already picturing Sarah's face lighting up when she saw me. I'd even picked up her favorite caramel popcorn from that little shop near O'Hare. But as I turned into our driveway, something inside me paused. Two cars. Familiar, but unexpected. Gavin's black Jeep, parked aggressively across the lawn like it owned the space. And Tina's silver Lexus tucked neatly in its usual visitor spot. That alone wasn't cause for alarm. They visited often, but there was a tightness in my chest that I couldn't quite explain. I killed the engine and got out slowly, listening. Laughter floated over the wooden fence. Splashing. High-pitched shrieks. It was the sound of summer, joyous and careless. But for some reason, it made me uneasy. I walked through the side gate and stepped into the backyard. Clarissa was lounging in a deck chair, drink in hand, sunglasses perched on her head like she was born into leisure. The twins, Gavin and Tina's daughters, were in the pool, splashing and squealing, throwing neon balls back and forth. Tina was perched beside Clarissa, legs crossed, sipping from a wine glass like they were two queens presiding over their domain. Gavin manned the grill, shirt half-buttoned, flipping burgers like he'd been ordained by charcoal and flame. They all turned as I approached, surprise flashing across their faces in degrees. Clarissa sat up slightly, pulling her cover up around her. Gavin raised an eyebrow. Tina blinked like I'd interrupted a scene she didn't expect to have an audience for. "Julian," Clarissa said, forcing a smile. "You're home early." "Canceled meeting," I replied, my voice neutral. "Thought I'd surprise you." "Well, surprise," Tina chimed in, lifting her glass. "Pool day with the girls." I looked around. 3 kids in the pool, Gavin and Tina's twins, and one of their nieces, I assumed. But not Sarah. I scanned again. My daughter was 10. A little quiet, a little bookish, but she loved the water. Loved it. Last summer, she'd begged for extra lessons just to perfect her backstroke. She would have been the first one in. "Where's Sarah?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. Clarissa glanced at Gavin, then back at me, chuckling nervously. "Oh, she's probably in the shed." The twins needed the pool to themselves. She said it like it was nothing. Like it was reasonable. Like putting a child, my child, in a dusty, cluttered backyard shed while other kids played in her own house was just another logistical compromise. Gavin snorted, lifting the spatula with an exaggerated flip. "Blood comes first," he said. My feet were already moving before I realized it. Past the pool, past the laughter. I didn't even hear what Clarissa or Tina said after that. The shed sat in the far corner of the yard, a sun-bleached rectangle of wood and rusted hinges. I reached it in long strides, my heart pounding now. Not with panic, but something darker. I unlatched the door and opened it slowly. Inside, it was dim and humid. The air smelled of motor oil and old leaves. Tools hung crooked on pegboards. Boxes of Christmas lights stacked carelessly in a corner. And there, on a folding chair, knees pulled up to her chest, was Sarah. Her eyes were red. She looked up slowly, and the second she saw me, her whole body jumped. "Daddy!" she cried, scrambling toward me. I dropped to my knees and caught her as she flung herself into my arms. Her body shook. I felt her little hands gripping the back of my shirt like she was afraid I'd vanish. "I didn't know you were coming home," she whispered into my neck. "I didn't either," I whispered back. "But I'm here now." We sat there for a moment in that dusty shed, just breathing. "Aunt Tina said the pool was only for real cousins today," she said finally. "Mommy told me to wait in here so they wouldn't feel left out." I pulled back to look at her. "Wait in here." She nodded, her voice small. "She said I had snacks and my tablet, so I'd be fine." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Sarah looked up at me again, her eyes wide. "Daddy, am I not a real cousin?" That question didn't deserve an answer. I lifted her into my arms and stood up. "You're my daughter," I said quietly. "That's what you are. That's all that matters." I carried her out of the shed, sunlight hitting us like a spotlight. I walked past the pool, past the lounging women and smug brother-in-law, and straight into the house. No one said a word. Maybe they sensed what was coming. Maybe they didn't care. But in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Not just for me. Not just because of some line they'd crossed. But because of the little girl still clinging to me like I was the only part of the world that made sense. And maybe I was. That day ended something between me and Clarissa. A quiet contract, invisible but binding, had been burned to ash in that shed. Because from that moment forward, I wasn't negotiating anymore. I was protecting. I carried Sarah into the house, one arm under her knees, the other around her back, holding her close like she was glass. She didn't weigh much, but the heaviness I felt walking across that yard could have crushed me. Behind us, laughter bubbled up again, forced, too loud. The twins shrieked in the pool. Gavin flipped a burger like nothing had happened, and Clarissa didn't even come after us. Not a single call of concern, not a glance. Just silence. Inside, the air conditioning hit like a slap, but it did nothing to cool the fire behind my ribs. I set Sarah down gently on the kitchen island stool and turned on the tap, wetting a clean dish towel. Her cheeks were flushed, tear-streaked, and smudged with what looked like shed dust and faint streaks of orange juice. "Here, baby," I said softly, pressing the cool towel to her forehead, wiping under her eyes. "Let's get you cleaned up." She looked up at me, brows furrowed like she was the one who'd done something wrong. Did I make them mad? No, I said firmly, meeting her eyes. You didn't do anything wrong. Do you understand me? Nothing. She nodded, hesitantly, but I knew that kind of wound didn't vanish with reassurances. I helped her off the stool, led her upstairs to the bathroom, and ran her a warm bath. I sat on the closed toilet lid as she soaked quietly, letting the water and the quiet undo some of what had been done. Her silence was too practiced. 10-year-olds shouldn't have a routine for being pushed aside. "Sarah," I asked, "has Mommy ever asked you to stay in the shed before?" She looked up, blinking, her mouth slightly open. "No, not the shed. Just sometimes when the twins come, I have to go to my room early. Or stay upstairs." My chest went tight. "How often?" She shrugged, and I could see she didn't even register it as unusual. "Sometimes when you're gone. Aunt Tina says it's because I'm not like them." Not like them. I closed my eyes briefly, inhaling through my nose. I wanted to punch something. No. I wanted to tear something down to the studs and rebuild it with stone. When Sarah finished her bath, I wrapped her in the softest towel we had, carried her to her room, and helped her into her favorite pajamas. Then I made her favorite grilled cheese, cut diagonally, just like she liked it, and we ate at the table, just the two of us. I didn't say much. I let her talk about her favorite teacher, a book she was reading, how she wanted to learn the violin. Not once did Clarissa come inside to check on us. By the time Sarah was tucked into bed, with her stuffed rabbit, Penny, resting under one arm, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "I love you more than anyone else in this world. You know that, right?" She smiled sleepily. "I know. I love you too, Daddy." I stood by her door for a few extra seconds, watching her drift. Then I turned and walked downstairs. Clarissa and the others were finally inside, drinks in hand, watching some movie in the living room like they hadn't shoved a child into a spiderweb storage box that afternoon. Tina saw me first. She gave a little smirk, like I was being overly dramatic. Gavin gave me a nod, mouth full of burger. And Clarissa, she looked up at me, eyes blank. "She okay?" I stared at her. "You made our daughter sit in the shed." She wasn't alone, Clarissa said quickly. She had her tablet. Tina chimed in. "And snacks. She even had that apple juice she likes. It's not like we locked her in there with a shovel and told her to dig." I didn't laugh. I didn't blink. "She's not a guest here. This is her house," I said quietly, but every syllable was steel. Gavin set down his drink, leaned back with that irritating self-satisfied shrug. "Julian, it was just one afternoon. You're acting like we left her on a highway. One afternoon can tell you everything about a person," I said. Gavin shrugged. "Look, blood comes first. The twins are our family." "So is she," I snapped. Tina raised a brow. "She's not our blood." And Clarissa, she didn't say a word. That silence? It was louder than everything else. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a statement. And that was when the decision crystallized. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't scream. I just walked to the kitchen, grabbed a bottle of water, took a slow sip, and leaned against the counter while the three of them tried to pretend I hadn't just watched them write my daughter out of the story they thought they controlled. Clarissa followed me later to the bedroom, after the twins were tucked in and Gavin and Tina were sleeping in what used to be my guest room. She stood in the doorway, arms folded. You're upset. I looked at her, quiet, calm. Why didn't you defend her? I didn't want to make a scene, she said. It was just a small compromise. You made a child believe she was second tier. Less than. Clarissa hesitated, her expression unreadable. Their family, Julian. You don't understand the pressure. No, I interrupted. I understand it perfectly. You made a choice. And you thought I wouldn't notice because I'm always on the road. Her silence was answer enough. I turned back to my suitcase, pretending to unpack while my brain started building a plan. Because here's what Clarissa didn't know, didn't care to remember. I owned this house. My name was the only one on the deed. I had accounts she didn't know about, trusts set up before we ever met, investment properties, financial leverage she assumed I'd never use. And now, I was going to use it all. For Sarah. Because if they believed that little girl didn't belong here, then maybe they were the ones who needed to leave. I didn't wait until morning. Once Sarah was asleep, I went back downstairs, quiet but deliberate. The three of them were in the living room, watching some action movie I used to like before I associated it with this night. Clarissa lounged with a glass of wine like nothing had happened. Tina was texting, probably in a group chat with her judgmental sisters. Gavin had the remote in his hand, his legs sprawled like he owned the place. My place. I stood at the edge of the room. You made her sit in a shed, I said, calm but pointed. Our daughter. My daughter. Tina scoffed without looking up. Julian, are you still on that? She had snacks, her tablet, and she was out of the sun. You act like we chained her up out there. She's not a guest. She lives here, I said, voice growing steelier. This is her home. That shed is for tools and rusted bikes, not children who don't share your bloodline. Gavin looked over at me, unfazed. Julian, relax. It's just one afternoon. The twins wanted to swim, and Tina didn't want drama. That's all. The pool's not that big. Sarah's a sweet girl, but the twins are our blood. I don't think he meant to make it sound as sharp as it did, but it cut anyway. I felt it lodge in the center of my chest. Our blood, he said, like Sarah wasn't even on the same family tree, like she was a tolerated pet. And Clarissa? She sipped her wine, didn't even look at me. No flinch, no regret. Just silence. My gaze fixed on her. You didn't say anything. Her lips parted slightly, but nothing came. Not a defense, not a denial. Just air. I nodded slowly. Right. Tina set her phone down and looked at me like I was the one being irrational. Julian, the girls are only here for one weekend. Sarah sees you every day when you're home. Our twins barely get to hang out with their aunt. She's not an accessory you push aside when guests arrive, I said. Gavin stood, trying to keep the peace, or maybe trying to assert some alpha posture. Man, let's not blow this out of proportion. You've got that tone, like you're gearing up for a speech. Don't forget who's been helping keep this family together while you jet off for work. I stepped closer. You think keeping the grill hot and drinking my liquor makes you the glue around here? Gavin raised a brow. I think showing up matters. You're gone half the month. I'm working, I said flatly. Providing. You think this house pays for itself? Gavin shrugged. Money doesn't raise kids. And that's when I saw Clarissa glance away again. I'm sorry, I said slowly. Are you under the impression that I'm not raising my daughter? Or is it that you think you and your bloodline get to overrule mine? Gavin was still standing, but now he was smirking like he'd hit a nerve and won a point. Julian, come on. Let's not do the whole macho provider thing. I'm just saying. When it comes down to it, family steps up. Blood family. You get that, right? She is my blood, I snapped. He blinked. Clarissa's, not yours. I didn't move. For a second, I just stared at him, stunned by how easily he reduced my daughter to a technicality. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I realized the truth. These people didn't see Sarah as family. They never did. Not really. I turned to Clarissa, needing her to say something, anything to contradict what he'd said. Is that how you feel too? She hesitated. Julian, they didn't mean anything harmful. It was just one afternoon. My heart dropped. You're not answering the question, I said. Is that how you feel? That she's not really mine? Please, she said, standing now, tone shifting to defensive. Don't do this. Don't twist this into some attack on your parenting. You've always been a great dad. But the twins are sensitive, and sometimes Sarah doesn't mesh well with them. She's 10, I said. She shouldn't have to mesh with anyone. She should feel safe in her own house. Loved. Prioritized. And you made her sit in a shed because the twins might feel crowded? Gavin raised both hands, backing away. Man, this feels personal. Let's all cool off. No, I said. It is personal. Tina stood now too, arms crossed. You're overreacting, Julian. You've always had that temper. My eyes locked onto hers. This isn't temper. It's clarity. I stepped back, glancing at all three of them. These people who saw themselves as the core of some sacred inner circle, who saw Sarah as an obligation, a footnote. You all made something very clear today. And I heard you. I heard all of you. I turned without another word and climbed the stairs 2 at a time. I closed Sarah's door behind me and just sat there on the edge of her bed, watching her breathe and sleep. She looked peaceful now, trusting. She didn't know yet how deep the betrayal ran. But I did. I knew I couldn't stay. I knew I couldn't let her keep growing up thinking she was second place. Forgotten. Invisible. That moment in the shed, her voice, her face, the way she ran into my arms like I was air after suffocating, that was the line. I tucked the blanket tighter around her shoulders and whispered, "It's going to be different soon, baby. I promise." Then I stood and left her room, headed to the study, and pulled out the brown folder I kept in the bottom drawer. I flipped it open. House deed. Title and my name alone. The bank account Clarissa didn't know about. The trust fund from my aunt. Everything I'd never had to use as leverage. Until now. My phone lit up on the desk beside me. A text from Clarissa. Are you still angry? Come to bed. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a private tab and searched for short-term apartments near Sarah's school. 2 bedrooms. Safe neighborhood. Move-in ready. Because something had cracked tonight. And I wasn't sealing it with apologies and silence. They thought they could shrink Sarah's world. But they forgot who she belonged to. Me. And I wasn't going to let them forget again. That night, I sat on the living room couch long after the others went to bed, with the glow of the lamp throwing soft light across the floor. My thoughts weren't still. They churned, pushed by every word I hadn't said, every moment I'd missed while traveling, every expression Sarah must have worn when no one was looking. A part of me wanted to believe this was a one-time misstep, a lapse in judgment, a fluke. But deep down, I knew better. Something had been building for years, settling like dust on the corners of our lives, subtle but thickening over time. When Sarah woke up the next morning, she was back to her sweet, polite self, as though nothing had happened. She sat at the kitchen counter with her knees tucked under her oversized hoodie, sipping from the same mug she'd decorated with glitter stickers. Her eyes flicked toward Clarissa briefly, but then back to her cereal, trained not to cause ripples. I sat across from her. You okay? She nodded but didn't meet my eyes. I'm fine. Tell me the truth, I said gently. She finally looked at me, and that's when I saw it. Not pain. Not even confusion. Resignation. She was used to it. That hit harder than anything else. I'm always fine, Daddy. It's not a big deal. Yes, it is, I said, keeping my voice steady. And you don't have to be fine when something hurts. She fiddled with her spoon, chewing on the inside of her cheek. Then she said, almost in a whisper, it's not the first time. My stomach dropped. When I'm here with Mommy and Uncle Gavin's family comes over, I usually go upstairs, or to the garage, or I help in the kitchen. Sometimes Mommy says it's easier that way. Easier for who? I asked, even though I already knew. She says the twins get overwhelmed, and that I already know how to handle things better than them. Handle being ignored? She shrugged like that was the wrong question. I think she means I'm strong. My heart cracked a little more at that. You are strong, I said. But that doesn't mean people should test how strong you are just because they feel like it. Sarah nodded again, her lips tight, trying not to let emotion show. Aunt Tina said I wasn't really their cousin. That Mommy married you after I was born, and that cousins are supposed to match in families. I leaned forward. Listen to me. You don't need to match anyone. You are mine. My daughter. And that's not up for debate. She didn't cry. She just blinked, like she didn't want to let me see what it felt like to finally hear someone say it with certainty. I stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her into a hug. She leaned into me for a long moment. That hug told me more than anything else. Her little body exhaled all the tension it had been holding in. I held her a little longer than necessary. I needed it too. Later that night, after Clarissa left for a spa appointment Tina had scheduled, just a little sister reset, she said with a breezy kiss on my cheek, I went into the garage and made a call to my lawyer, David Shin. He'd helped me settle the estate from my late aunt and had always been good about discretion. David, I said as soon as he picked up. I need to talk contingency planning. He paused. Are you okay? I'm about to be. I told him everything. The deed, the assets, the custody setup, or lack thereof. He pulled up records as we spoke. Julian, you've never listed Clarissa on anything other than joint checking. She has no legal claim to the house, and if Sarah isn't biologically hers, and there's no adoption paperwork, custody won't default to her in any split. This isn't going to be messy for you, at least not legally. But emotionally? That, David said, is already messy, I'm guessing. I hung up with a list of steps to take. Financially, I was ready. Emotionally, I didn't have the luxury of time to process. I had a daughter whose reality was being chipped away every time I left town. And Clarissa, whatever version of her I married, I wasn't sleeping beside her anymore. I was sharing space with someone who prioritized convenience over kindness. I called my financial advisor next. Meryl was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who never sugarcoated things. Moving money, she asked without asking why. Yes, I said. And I want a new apartment lease, 2-bedroom, furnished, safe school district. Quiet area. I want it done before next Friday. She whistled low. All right, Julian. You're not playing. No, I said. I'm finally choosing the right team. By Tuesday, I had a place ready. Bright. Clean. A few blocks from Sarah's school. I told Clarissa I had to leave town Friday morning for a surprise presentation, and she barely blinked. On Thursday night, I packed a suitcase for both me and Sarah while she slept. Just the essentials. I'd let her decorate the new place how she wanted, give her that feeling of belonging we'd all been denying her without realizing it. That night, as I stood in Sarah's doorway, watching her sleep peacefully, I felt two things, grief and resolve. Grief for the life I thought we had, an unshakable resolve to build the one she deserved. Because this wasn't just about a pool day, or a shed, or Tina's cruelty masked as social pecking order. It was about the cracks that had gone unnoticed, the gaslighting that came with smiles, and the way people like Clarissa learned to manipulate normalcy so well that you almost forgot it was wrong, until your child cried in a corner full of rakes and mildew. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay awake replaying every moment I'd dismissed, every trip I'd taken, trusting Clarissa to protect our daughter. That guilt sat in my chest like lead. But I promised myself this, Sarah would never feel like that again. Not under my roof. Not on my watch. When morning came, I made pancakes and woke her up with a gentle kiss. I told her we were going on a weekend adventure, just the two of us. Her face lit up, and I swore to myself I'd keep that light alive this time. No more sheds. No more silence. We were walking out, and we weren't coming back. Friday morning looked like any other morning to Clarissa. She moved about in her satin robe, nursing her almond milk latte and scrolling through her phone. I stood in the kitchen, dressed like I was headed for the airport, blazer on, overnight bag near the door, work laptop slung over my shoulder. The illusion was perfect. She didn't even ask where I was going. She didn't care. That used to bother me, but now I saw it for what it was, a gift. A green light. The freedom to vanish quietly. Sarah came downstairs in her favorite hoodie, the yellow one with the small bunny stitched on the sleeve. I'd already told her the plan, a special weekend, just the two of us. I made it sound like a surprise trip, hotel stay, indoor pool, pancakes, her pick of movies, and room service. She beamed. She didn't ask questions. She didn't even glance at Clarissa. I kissed Clarissa on the cheek like nothing was amiss. She gave me a distracted good luck at the meeting without ever looking up. That was the last time we'd speak in that house as husband and wife. Once we got on the road, I exhaled. Sarah kicked off her sneakers in the passenger seat, humming to a song on the radio. For the first time in what felt like years, I saw her shoulders relax. It reminded me how much tension she'd learned to carry out. Shoulders always slightly up, jaw always just a bit tight, like she was afraid she'd be in the way. We checked into the hotel by 10. I let her jump on the bed while I unpacked. The room smelled like citrus and clean sheets. She tugged open the curtains to find an indoor pool through the glass. Daddy, look. No cousins to kick me out. I smiled, even though my heart twisted a little. Nope. All yours, sweetheart. She splashed in that pool for 2 hours, then wrapped herself in a fluffy towel and ordered chicken tenders and chocolate milk like she'd done it 100 times. We watched cartoons and built pillow forts and laughed until she got the hiccups. I didn't check my phone once. I was present, really present, for the first time in too long. Meanwhile, back at the house, movers were at work. I'd hired a team Clarissa didn't know. Quiet, professional, efficient. They had a list. Sarah's books, toys, clothes, artwork from school, her violin. My suits, my files, the framed photo of me and Sarah at the zoo, where she'd clung to my arm and laughed so hard at the giraffes her face turned red. Everything else? Left behind. I didn't want memories soaked in Clarissa's indifference. I didn't need reminders of who she'd become. I also had the locks at the new apartment changed, the lease finalized under a shell company, one I'd used years ago to manage real estate. Clarissa would have no trail to follow until I was ready. She texted me Friday evening. Clarissa, did you leave Sarah's Kindle? I can't find it. Clarissa, also, when will you be back? The twins want to do another pool day. I didn't respond. Saturday, more messages. Clarissa, her room is kind of a mess. Did you take something? Clarissa, Julian. Still, I said nothing. That night, Sarah and I made microwave s'mores and watched an old superhero movie she'd never seen. Halfway through, she leaned against me and whispered, "This is the best trip ever." I kissed the top of her head. "It's only the beginning, kiddo." Sunday morning, I took her out to breakfast at a diner near the apartment. We sat in a booth by the window and watched people walk their dogs. She dipped her pancake in syrup until it fell apart. I didn't stop her. There was no one there to criticize, no one to call her too messy or not ladylike. After breakfast, I drove us to the new place. She bounced in her seat, holding the keys I'd let her carry on a flamingo keychain. When we reached the door, I bent down beside her. "Ready?" She nodded. "This is our place now, okay? Just you and me." Her eyes widened. "Really? For always? As long as you want it to be." She stepped inside and gasped. Her things were already there, just like I promised. Her books were on a white shelf I built the night before, her stuffed animals arranged on her new bed. She raced into the second room. Her room spun around in a circle and fell backward onto the mattress, giggling. "No more shed," she said, arms outstretched. "No more anything that makes you feel small. I promised." While she explored, I checked my phone. Clarissa had escalated. "Clarissa, what the hell is going on? Clarissa, why is Sarah's entire room empty? Clarissa, Julian, answer me. Clarissa, if this is some kind of tantrum, I swear." Then came the missed call notifications. I silenced my phone and slid it face down. I wasn't going to explain myself to someone who couldn't defend our daughter when it mattered most. Let her stew. Let her scream. This wasn't for her. I spent the rest of the afternoon hanging up Sarah's posters, assembling her desk, and watching her move freely, like a kid who finally had space to be a kid. That night, I tucked her in beneath her new star-patterned sheets. She clutched Penny the rabbit and whispered, "Thank you, Daddy." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "This is just how it's supposed to be." She closed her eyes, her breathing slowing, her body softening like she could finally let go. When I stepped out of her room and closed the door behind me, I stood there in the hallway, hand on the frame. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel revenge. I felt peace, because I had just rewritten the ending. And this time, Sarah wasn't going to be the forgotten child in a corner of someone else's comfort. She was the center, the reason, the blood that mattered most. We pulled back into the old neighborhood Sunday evening, just as the streetlights were warming to life. I wasn't there to stay. I had no intention of sleeping under that roof again, but I had one more thread to cut clean. Clarissa's texts had gone from confusion to panic, and I knew the moment I walked through that door, I'd find a house mid-theater performance. They'd be waiting, questions rehearsed, alibis polished, the same brand of manipulation they'd spoon-fed Sarah now aimed at me. But I wasn't who I was a week ago. I wasn't there to argue. I was there to leave properly. Sarah held my hand as we walked up the driveway. I could feel the tension building in her fingers. She'd been brave all weekend. Laughter, pancakes, movies, new memories, but now she was back on the turf where she'd been told she didn't belong. She didn't say a word, just clutched my hand tighter. That was all I needed to feel. That was enough. I opened the front door, and there they were. Gavin on the couch, his legs sprawled like he paid the mortgage. Tina on her phone, but she looked up when she heard the door. Clarissa was already on her feet, glass in hand, as puffy like she'd cried on cue. "Julian," she said with too much breath, like my name carried an entire drama with it. "Where the hell have you been?" I stepped in slowly, Sarah still by my side. She was clinging to Penny now, her rabbit tucked tightly under one arm. You packed up her room. Clarissa continued, her voice rising. You took her things. You ignored every message. What is going on? Sarah flinched at the volume, and I felt her hand tremble. I stepped in front of her and looked right at Tina and Gavin. Where's her bed? Tina blinked. What? Sarah's bed. I said slowly, like they were slow. Where is it? Her desk? Her books. Gavin stood, rubbing the back of his neck like he wanted to look composed. We moved the stuff into the guest room. The twins needed space. It's just one night. One night won't kill her, Tina added, like it was a joke. I nodded. She can sleep on the couch. Is that what you said? Tina gave a quick smile. She's resilient. I turned to Clarissa. Is this what you agreed to? Julian, she said, stepping closer like she thought her proximity might soften things. It was temporary. They arrived before we expected. I didn't have time to prepare. You had 10 years to prepare, I said, I sliding into my tone. And all that time, you chose their comfort over her belonging. Clarissa's eyes darted towards Sarah, who was now half hiding behind me. I'm her mother. No, you're not. I said it clearly, calmly. You married into that role. You don't get to redefine it based on convenience. Gavin crossed his arms. What is this, Julian? A meltdown? I turned to him slowly. You told me blood comes first. Remember that. He looked confused. I didn't mean, no. You meant it. You meant she wasn't real family. You meant she could be pushed aside for your twins. You meant she was lesser. Tina stood now, offended by the truth. You're twisting everything. Am I? I said. Because you moved her bed without permission. You erased her room. You gave her no place. And Clarissa, you let it happen. Clarissa's face flushed. I didn't think you'd react this way. It's not permanent. They were only visiting. You told her to sit in a shed. I snapped, my voice low but forceful now. You let her believe she had to disappear for them to feel welcome. You fed that to her like it was kindness. She had her tablet, Tina said again. I turned to Sarah. Do you want to stay here? She shook her head, almost imperceptibly. You don't have to, I said gently. Not ever again. Clarissa stepped forward, voice breaking. Julian, don't do this. Oh, I've already done it, I replied. Sarah and I have moved out. We have our own place now. One where she has a room no one else can take. One where she belongs without question. Gavin's voice rose. You're throwing away a marriage over one bad weekend? I turned my eyes on him. No. I'm ending it because you taught my daughter that love is conditional. That space is earned through blood, not loyalty. That her silence is preferable to your twins' comfort. Tina rolled her eyes. She's 10. Kids forget. I looked down at Sarah. She wasn't blinking. She wasn't moving. She won't forget this, I said. Not the way you made her feel. Not the way you looked past her. And not the way I stood here and finally said no. Clarissa looked desperate now. You're being cruel. No, I said. I'm being clear. I took Sarah's hand again. We came back to say goodbye. Not to negotiate. Not to explain. You made your choices. I made mine. I turned, walking her back toward the door. Clarissa followed. Julian, she called after us. Please. We can fix this. I opened the door. You had every chance to fix it while I was gone. You chose to pretend she didn't matter. I'm not going to pretend with you anymore. Sarah paused on the porch. Clarissa bent toward her like she wanted a last chance. Sweetheart, don't you want to come give Mommy a hug? Sarah looked up at me, then back at her. No, thank you, she said quietly. And then we walked. We got in the car, and I buckled her in. She looked out the window as we pulled away, but she didn't cry. She didn't ask questions. She just reached for my hand on the gear shift, and I gave it to her. That was brave, I said. So was leaving the shed, she said softly. The sun dipped behind the houses as we turned onto the main road. A new week was waiting. A new chapter already opened. And she wouldn't ever be the leftover again. Because she didn't belong to them. She belonged with me. Clarissa's first reaction to the divorce papers was confusion. She stood in the foyer in leggings and a loose cardigan, the kind she wore when she wanted to appear softer, less calculated. Her eyes scanned the documents like they were printed in a foreign language. Behind her, the echoes of the life we used to share clung to the walls, framed wedding photos, a smudged handprint Sarah made in kindergarten. But all I saw was a house full of silence that had let a child cry in a shed. You're not serious, Clarissa finally said, voice thin. Julian, This is insane. I stood still, composed. I'm done. She flipped through the pages again, her hand trembling now. Wait, wait, the house is in your name? Yes, I said plainly. It always has been. You were never added to the deed. Her mouth opened, then closed. She hadn't expected that. For years, I let her believe we were equals in that space, that her name carried the same weight as mine on every brick. But I'd inherited this house from my aunt. I paid the taxes. I did the maintenance. I stayed quiet, out of trust. That silence had cost Sarah too much. I wasn't paying it anymore. She tried a different tactic then, tears. You're going to take everything from me? Is that what this is? I'm taking Sarah out of a place where she was treated like a guest in her own home. I made mistakes, Julian, but you're reacting like I tried to hurt her. I didn't flinch. You let it happen, over and over. That's not a mistake. That's a pattern. She paced, arms crossed, holding the papers like they might burn her fingers. You're divorcing me over a misunderstanding. You're right, I said. I misunderstood who you were for a long time. I thought you loved Sarah like your own. I thought family meant something deeper to you than just bloodlines and appearances. She looked up sharply. That's not fair. No, I said. What's not fair is a 10-year-old girl being pushed out of her own room so the real cousins could have sleepovers. What's not fair is her crying in a storage shed while you drank sangria with Tina. Clarissa's voice cracked. I didn't know it was that serious. I stared at her. That's the problem. She shifted strategies again, softer now. Julian, we were building something. A life. You're just going to throw that away. You already did. You just didn't notice when. She backed into the wall, tears threatening but not falling. I can't believe you're doing this. You don't have to believe it. You just have to sign it. She didn't. At least not right away. Clarissa did what Clarissa always did. She fought it the only way she knew how, by pretending she still held power. She tried calling my bluff, saying she'd contest everything. I let her. I let her sit in a conference room across from my lawyer and bluff through tears and indignation until David slid the file across the table and let the truth settle between them. The house. Mine. The assets. Shielded years ago in separate trusts and investment portfolios under my name only. Custody? Clarissa had never legally adopted Sarah. She had no biological tie, no paperwork linking her beyond marriage. And now that the marriage was ending, she had no parental claim at all. I watched her unravel in real time, her face collapsing in tiny, desperate movements. She looked to her lawyer for lifelines that weren't there. She'll testify. Clarissa tried, reaching for the one card she thought she could still play. Sarah loves me. David leaned forward. If we call Sarah to the stand, you understand we'd be asking a 10-year-old child to explain why her room was emptied for house guests. Do you really want to hear her answer? Clarissa went quiet. After that meeting, she didn't try again. Her calls dwindled. Her texts became passive-aggressive apologies wrapped in regret. I ignored most of them. I had nothing left to explain. Gavin and Tina were quieter than I expected. No late-night calls, no confrontations. I figured Clarissa told them what the court had confirmed. She had no ground to stand on, no custody to fight for, no home to return to. I heard later that Gavin stopped bringing the twins around. Word had spread, not just within the family, but within the community. People talk. It's human nature. And when they learned Sarah had been locked away so Gavin's kids could have a clear swim, they started choosing sides. Quietly, but definitely. Tina's social media became a stream of vague quotes about jealousy and family betrayal. Gavin withdrew from the loud confidence he used to carry into every room. They lost whatever crown they thought they wore. But I didn't celebrate that. I didn't need to. All I needed was in front of me every night when I tucked Sarah into her bed, in her own room, in a home where no one ever asked her to move. Her school called to tell me her performance had improved. She started raising her hand more, laughing with her friends again. I noticed it in little ways. How she sang while brushing her teeth, how she danced while making toast, how she stopped looking over her shoulder like she might get in trouble for existing too loudly. I also started seeing the gaps, the ones I had to fill. One afternoon, while cleaning out an old box of her drawings, she asked, "Do you think Mommy ever really liked me?" I looked up from the folder. I think she liked the idea of being a mom more than the job itself. Sarah nodded. I tried to be easy. I didn't want to be too much. That crushed me. I knelt down and took her hand. You're never too much. Do you hear me? Not ever. She nodded again, but this time with a small smile. Okay. She started drawing more. Writing. Her therapist, someone I found and paid for privately, told me she was processing things well, all things considered. Resilient. Self-aware. Strong. She's lucky she has you, the therapist told me once. But I knew the truth. I was the lucky one. Clarissa never reached out for a formal goodbye. She sent a final message a few weeks after the court ruling. No apologies. Just, I hope someday you understand what it's like to lose everything. I stared at it for a long time, then deleted it. Because I hadn't lost everything. I'd protected the one thing worth everything. And she was upstairs, asleep in a room no one could ever take away again. I still remember the first morning in our new place when Sarah wandered into the kitchen, her hair a tangled halo, wearing her bunny hoodie backwards and yawning so wide I could see her back molars. It wasn't the sleepy shuffle or the way she leaned on the counter with one arm that caught me. It was the way she smiled. Easy, unburdened, like her little body had finally remembered what it meant to wake up without bracing for something. Want pancakes or waffles? I asked, flipping through the new breakfast menu I'd posted on the fridge just for her. A joke, but also a ritual. Every morning, she got to pick. She scanned it like she was a paying customer. Waffles, please. With whipped cream. Yes, ma'am. She sat at the table, her table now, in a space that would never again shift beneath her feet, and pulled out the sketchbook I'd bought her 2 weeks ago. It was already half full. Pages of trees and girls with superhero capes and a little house with a porch that looked suspiciously like ours. That week, I enrolled her in a new school. Smaller class sizes, teachers who called her by name the moment she walked in. I turned at myself. Met with the principal, asked hard questions. I watched Sarah the first time I dropped her off, holding her lunchbox tight to her chest, and I waited outside the gates until the bell rang, pretending to scroll through emails when really I was just watching her disappear into a crowd that didn't feel threatening for once. By the third day, she came home chattering about a girl named Lila who liked unicorns and had a glitter backpack. She said I could sit with her during silent reading, Sarah said, like it was the greatest gift anyone could receive. She has 2 older brothers but still lets me pick the book. That Friday, she joined the book club. The following Monday, she asked if she could sign up for violin. You sure? I asked, remembering how her eyes had lit up months ago watching a performance at school before Clarissa told her violin was a phase most kids quit. I want to try, she said. So I bought her a beginner's set, found her a patient teacher, and made space in the living room for music that didn't always sound good, but always sounded like growth. It was during one of those violin lessons at the community center that I met Melanie. She was walking her son, Caleb, down the hallway, balancing a juice box, a backpack, and a tired kind of grace that only single parents seem to carry. Sarah's lesson had run over, and Melanie and Caleb had paused outside the glass door, listening. She's really good, Melanie said when I stepped out. She's really determined, I answered. We chatted briefly. She was warm. Not performative, not leaning into charm like a weapon. Just real. Caleb was 7, a curious, wide-eyed kid with a chipped front tooth and questions about everything. We saw them again 2 weeks later at a community fundraiser for the arts program. Sarah spotted Caleb first and waved him over. I watched the 2 of them run off like they'd been friends for years, laughing over paper snow cones and chasing balloons. Melanie stood beside me, watching the same scene unfold. Your daughter's amazing, she said. She is, I said. And she's been through more than she should have had to. We talked all night after that. About books and parenting and things people never say out loud until they feel safe. She told me about her divorce, about the way some people make you feel like you're only as valuable as your ability to shrink. I told her about Clarissa and the shed and the moment I realized my daughter was being erased one weekend at a time. She didn't flinch. She didn't offer pity. She just nodded like she understood. Because she did. Over the next few months, we saw more of each other. Sometimes it was unplanned, library visits, school functions. Sometimes it was intentional. Saturday lunch after violin, movie nights where the kids fell asleep before the opening credits ended. Sarah loved her instantly. Not the way kids love adults who give them sugar or say yes to everything, but the quiet kind of love built from consistency. Melanie asked about her day, remembered the names of her stuffed animals, called her smart instead of pretty. And when Sarah scraped her knee in the parking lot after a bike ride and I was fumbling for napkins and water bottles, Melanie knelt beside her, cupped her face, and said, You're okay. I've got you. That was the moment I knew. We got married in the spring, nothing grand. Just a small courthouse ceremony, a few close friends, and the kids dressed up in outfits they picked themselves. Sarah wore a flower crown. Caleb held the rings. Melanie cried. I didn't, only because I'd already cried everything out long before. And then, months later, we finalized the adoption. Sarah sat on the judge's bench afterward, swinging her legs, holding the signed certificate like it was a trophy. She's really my mom now, right? She asked. She always acted like one, I said, kneeling beside her. Now the papers just caught up. Our home grew fuller. Caleb brought energy, noise, chaos. Sarah brought balance, warmth, insight. Melanie brought peace. The kind I never had in my last house. The kind you don't even realize you're missing until it fills the room. One night, while tucking Sarah into bed, she looked up at me and said, "It's like we got planted in the right soil." I blinked. What do you mean? Like we were seeds in the wrong garden before, she said. But now we get to grow. I sat with that for a long time after she fell asleep. The image of it. How right it felt. We were rooted now. In truth, in love, in a home where nobody had to earn their place by staying quiet. Sarah still plays violin. She still draws. But now her pictures have color. Her girls wear capes and crowns. Her houses have windows with light coming through. She signs her name in bold cursive, sometimes with hearts beside it. And she never asks if she's enough anymore. Because now, she knows. She always was. It was a Wednesday afternoon when my phone rang. A number I hadn't saved but recognized immediately. Gavin. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds, thumb hovering just above the reject button. 2 years of silence, and now this. I was at Sarah's school, parked in the shade, waiting to pick her up from violin club. The windows were cracked, the sun was soft, and the sound of distant laughter floated from the playground. The phone kept ringing. I answered. Julian. Gavin's voice came through, low and hesitant. Hey, it's been a while. I didn't say anything. I just waited. He sighed. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I needed to say something. I was wrong. About everything. Still, I said nothing. Let him sit in it. I mean it, he went on. About Sarah. About what we did. I know I acted like she didn't matter. Like she wasn't one of us. And I can't even begin to explain why, except that I was being an idiot. A proud idiot. I finally spoke. And now? Tina and I divorced, he said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. About 6 months ago. The girls are with her most of the time. I see them on weekends. But it's hard. They're struggling. I nodded slowly. And you think saying sorry fixes what you said to Sarah? No, he admitted. I don't. But I think maybe hearing it might help. If she wants to hear it. I exhaled and looked toward the school entrance. Any minute now, Sarah would walk through the double doors, swinging her case like a backpack, hair windblown and shoes always untied. That kid had survived more than people twice her age, and she wore it with quiet grace. I'll tell her, I said. But she decides, not me. That's fair, Gavin replied. That's more than fair. We hung up. No promises. No excuses. That evening, after dinner, I told Sarah. We were washing dishes, Melanie drying and Caleb singing to himself in the background, making towers out of clean cups. Sarah, I said gently, your Uncle Gavin called today. She stiffened. The sponge froze in her hand. He said he was sorry. Said he knows he was wrong. She didn't respond. He wants to apologize to you directly, I continued. Only if you want to hear it. You don't owe him anything. She stared at the soapy water for a long time. Then she wrung out the sponge and placed it neatly on the counter. Can I think about it? Of course. She didn't bring it up again for days. Then one night, just before bed, she slipped into the living room where Melanie and I were reading. She curled up beside me and said, I think I want to hear him say it. I don't know if I want to talk back yet, but I want to hear it. Okay, I said. We'll make that happen. So we did. A supervised video call. Melanie sat in the corner, quiet but present. Gavin appeared on screen looking older, hair a little grayer, posture less arrogant. His eyes softened the moment he saw Sarah. Hey, Sarah, he said, his voice low. You've gotten so big. I mean, not that you weren't already big, brave, but wow. Sarah nodded once. Neutral. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, he said. What I did to you, what I said about you was wrong. I thought I was protecting my own, But really, I was hurting someone I should have protected, too. You didn't deserve any of it. Not the shed. Not the silence. Not the way we treated you. She kept her face blank. But I saw it, the little twitch in her cheek. The way her fingers curled tighter around Penny, who still sometimes made appearances in moments like this. You don't have to forgive me, Gavin said. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see you now. The screen went quiet for a moment. Then Sarah, still calm, still herself, simply said, "Okay." Then she ended the call. She looked at me. I don't need him to say more. I just needed to know he knew. You handled that with a lot of grace, I said. She smiled faintly. I learned from you. That same week, a birthday card arrived in the mail. It was pale blue, the kind you find in the back corner of a drugstore. It was from Clarissa. I recognized the handwriting before Sarah even opened it. She read the message silently, lips moving faintly as she took in each word. There was an apology, brief, unsure. A sentence about remembering the way she used to hum when she drew. And I hope you're happy. She folded the card and placed it in her desk drawer without a word. You don't have to answer her, I said gently. I know, she replied. I just hope she's a better person now. That was Sarah. Always more generous than the world had been to her. The years rolled forward. School projects, recitals, weekend hikes with Melanie and Caleb. We built traditions that were only ours. Sunday pancakes, Friday movie nights, afternoon reading sessions on the back porch where Sarah read out loud while Caleb pretended not to fall asleep. And every time someone asked, teachers, neighbors, new friends, Sarah introduced herself the same way. Hi, I'm Sarah. That's my dad, and that's my mom, and that's my little brother. We're not a regular family. We're a better one. One evening, I found a note taped to her bedroom door. Do not enter. Author at work. Unless you have snacks. Inside, she was writing a story. It was about a girl who lived in a house with people who forgot she existed, until one day she realized she didn't have to stay there. She found a door. She walked through it. On the other side, there were people waiting with open arms and warm waffles. You writing your memoir already? I teased. She grinned. Maybe. Or maybe it's fiction. Well, I said, handing her a bowl of popcorn. Either way, the ending's just right. She tapped her pencil against her chin. I think I'll call it The Girl Who Grew Wings. I like that. Because that's exactly what she'd done. She didn't just survive. She soared. 16 looks good on Sarah. Not because of some superficial glow or teenage invincibility, but because of the way she carries herself now, like she knows exactly who she is and refuses to be edited. Her curls frame her face with that untamable confidence she's grown into. Her eyes are steady, no longer darting around for permission. Her laughter? Louder now. Freer. The kind that fills a room and makes people turn around to smile, not to hush her. She knows she belongs, because she watched herself be chosen, not tolerated. She's in her room now, typing on her laptop, surrounded by stacks of books and violin sheet music taped to her wall like trophies. There's a blanket draped over her shoulders even though it's warm, her comfort habit. On her desk sits a framed photo, the four of us, Melanie, Caleb, Sarah, and me, covered in paint from that chaotic backyard art day. Sarah insisted we hang it in the hallway too. Proof we make masterpieces even when it gets messy, she said. That girl, the one they once made sit in a shed, is now president of her school's Inclusion Alliance. She started the club herself, recruited kids from all kinds of family backgrounds, adopted, foster, blended, single parent, grandparent guardians, everything. She stood on stage at the fall assembly and read a poem she wrote called Rooms with Locks on the Outside. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. Her voice was steady the whole way through. When she finished, the principal walked over to her, visibly emotional, and said into the mic, I think we just heard from our next valedictorian. The room erupted. Sarah didn't shrink. She nodded with that same gentle pride I see in her every day. Caleb was in the front row, grinning like he had just watched a real-life superhero. That's my sister. He shouted to no one in particular, and everyone turned to look and laugh. Not at him, out of joy. Because he was right. Sometimes I catch Sarah late at night, writing letters she never sends. One to Clarissa. One to Gavin. One, once, to herself at age 10. I asked her about them once, gently. She smiled, folded the letter in half, and said, they're for letting go, not for keeping. That's how she moves now. Not in spite, not in bitterness, but in truth. Every morning, She makes her own lunch. Not because she has to. I'd make it gladly, but because she says it gives her control. Every sandwich is a tiny act of rebellion against the days when she had none. And yet, she's never hard. She's never cruel. When a new student came to her school last semester, a girl fresh out of a foster home, Sarah was the first one to greet her, walk her to class, offer her a seat in the cafeteria. She looked like she didn't know if she was allowed to breathe, Sarah told me. I used to know that look. She's teaching Caleb how to play violin now. He squeaks through the notes, tongue sticking out, eyes focused. She never scolds, just smiles and says, "Try again. This time, let it breathe." He listens. Always. The other day, Melanie and I stood at the doorway, watching the two of them. She leaned into me and whispered, "She's turning into someone the world doesn't deserve, but deeply needs." I nodded. She's becoming who she always was. Sarah still calls me her hero when she's being sentimental. Sometimes on birthdays, sometimes on holidays, sometimes just randomly after dinner. But she has no idea, none, that it's the other way around. That I've watched her become something powerful without ever stepping on anyone else to get there. That she's taught me more about love than any adult ever did. And yet, there are still questions people ask. Sometimes at community events, at school functions, at parent-teacher nights, someone will eventually say it. Usually kindly, usually with curiosity disguised as concern. "Do you think you overreacted?" They don't say it harshly. They usually mean well. They weren't there. I smile, every time. The same practice smile. Then I tell them this. Children don't get second chances at childhood. You don't get to replay those moments, the ones where they feel invisible or unwanted, or like space in their home is conditional. You don't get a rewind button to say, "Next time, I'll speak up," or "Next time, I'll stop them from crying in a shed." And if you don't protect them now, in those first chapters, you may lose them forever. I don't mean lose them physically. I mean lose the softness in them. The part that believes they matter. The part that dreams, creates, sings, questions. The part that says, "I am worth standing up for." So no, I didn't overreact. I made a choice. A loud, clear, definitive choice to stand between my daughter and anyone who tried to shrink her. She never sat in another shed again. Not because I pulled her out, but because I built her a house where there were no sheds. No locked doors. No rooms with rules about bloodlines. Just family, chosen, real, and resilient. Sarah will graduate in 2 years. She's already talking about scholarships, about majoring in social work or law or something else where she gets to make sure kids like me don't get left behind. I believe she'll do it. Not because she's fueled by revenge, but because she knows what it's like to grow up in the shadow of almost being forgotten, and she's made it her mission to remember everyone. Sometimes, when the house is quiet and the others are asleep, I sit in the living room and look at the light coming from her slightly ajar door. She always sleeps with it cracked now. "I like knowing I can open it whenever I want," she once said. It reminds me I'm not stuck. And I think back to that day, that afternoon, the driveway, the shed, the way her face lit up when she saw me, the way her arms wrapped around me like I was the oxygen she'd been waiting for. She never asked for a revolution. She just asked for room. And I gave her the world.